Outstanding.
Wow, right, excellent. I guess, are you filming this? Is that, you guys?
Yes, sir.
Go with the camera? Okay, I'll try to smile appropriately with my face mask on. And so, if that is all true, what Cadet Medrano said this morning about me, I'm like you. I was an ROTC cadet once upon a time, nearly 30 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. And believe it or not, I'll close with this at the end of my introductory comments. You will find yourself in a quarter century from now where I am. For those of you who end up making the commitment to serve in our Air Force or Space Force, you're going to be me in just about 25 years or so. And you will be the 06 Colonel or General Officer when our Air Force celebrates its 100th anniversary. Or for those of you going Space Force, when our Space Force celebrates its first quarter of a century. And that's pretty exciting. To me, I think it's pretty exciting, but it also just shows you that this is a tradition that we have where we are passing the baton, my generation, to you as our future leaders, and you will be doing the same thing. It never ends. And that's something that you should all be proud of being a part of, for those of you who elect to do that. It's true I was in a different part of the country when I went to school when I was a cadet. I was a crosstown cadet, so quick show of hands, any crosstown cadets in the room right now? Okay, we've got one lone crosstown cadet. I can relate. I feel where you're coming from because that was the challenges of being a crosstown cadet. When I was a crosstown cadet, one of the things that we always thought about is how we're being virtually separated from the rest of our cadet wing, and we don't get to see each other all the time. We don't get to hang out with each other in person every day. And guess what? That's normal for all of us right now. That's a result of COVID-19. So now everybody's a crosstown cadet. Think about it. Although I am glad to see that you're all here in person today. Or at least, those of us that are here in the auditorium today. I know that what we've experienced as a region and as a national enterprise over the past semester is that, you can get some classes done virtually online, you can do that, but you miss out on a lot of the things that you ordinarily can do as fellow cadets when you're in person with each other. Just being able to spend time with each other outside of the classroom, during Lee Lab, outside of Lee Lab, just being able to hang out together, play foosball together. That actually is super important time for developing your relationships with each other and honing yourselves as a team. And again, I can relate to that. That said, I was in California, so it was a little bit warmer place than where we are here now today. You guys got a whole lot of snow yesterday. Apparently, we're going to be getting some more. For those of you who are paying attention to the weather, we've got the cold front coming in today, some more snow today, and perhaps some more next week as well. And I can relate to that because I come from the Northeast. I'm from Buffalo, New York. And yes, I am a Bills fan, in case anybody's wondering. Hopefully there's no New England Patriots fans here in this auditorium. Now, okay, good. I'm seeing head shakes. So most of you are probably Bengals fans or maybe Browns fans. Or, I'm guessing, all right, good. Okay, we got some of those. Probably maybe a couple Bears fans, perhaps. I don't know. So yeah, I'm used to the cold weather and I'm used to the Northeast. And for me, it's good to be back home in that sense. I live just up the road, about an hour away from here in Dayton, Ohio. I'm stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm going to go take a wild stab here that some of you have been to Wright-Patterson before. Quick show of hands. How many have been to Wright-Patterson? Almost all of you. Okay. If you haven't been to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base because you are so close, you got to go see it. You got to go check it out. If for no other reason than to go see the Air Force Museum. And if you happen to like airplanes, which I'm hoping most of you do, it's a great museum. It's one of the best museums in the nation. I mean, it's right up there with the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., if you haven't been to that one, or to the Ipar Hazy by Dulles International Airport. Those are like the three best museums in the country. And you got one right in your backyard right here. And it's not just about aircraft, it's also about spacecraft too. So kind of quick show of hands here. How many folks here in this room are interested in space? Anyway, 1, 2, okay, good. When I see 2 hands pop up, what that really tells me is there's probably like 5 times as many people out there, but everybody's a little bit hesitant to self-acknowledge as like a space junkie. So I'll just be clear with all of you that I am an unapologetic space nut. And I do. Just like I love airplanes, I love space, and I love the space program. I worked for a little while at NASA when I was in California. And truthfully, I wanted to fly. So, quick show of hands, how many of you want to fly a jet? Okay, well, half of you. I'll say about half of you. Good. I wanted to fly. That was my dream. And ever since I was a little kid, I watched airplanes. My house was on final approach for our local municipal airport, and those jets would fly right over my roof. And my brother and I would sit on top of our house, no kidding, crawl out the bathroom window on our second floor, sit on it. We kind of had a flat roof, and we'd watch airplanes coming over the house. It was awesome. Shake the whole house. I'm sure my parents didn't like that, but we loved it. It was just good foreshadowing for the rest of my Air Force career, because that's what I pretty much did for the rest of my Air Force career, is get flown over by aircraft. And so I wanted to go to school, get my degree, become a pilot, ideally become a test pilot, and then become an astronaut. That was my dream. That was my goal. So my scholarship, my Air Force scholarship, was actually in astrophysics. And so that's what I figured, to be perfect, to prepare me to become an astronaut. That's my dream, that's my goal, that's my plan. Well, some things changed between my graduation of high school and my graduation of college. And as you can see, I didn't end up becoming an astronaut, right? And I didn't end up becoming a pilot. And my life took some different twists and turns, and that's okay. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about today is be prepared for adjustments in your plans. You know, in the military, we say there's a difference between deliberate planning and crisis planning. And no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And sometimes, in my case, the enemy was me. Because if any of you are like I was when I was in college, I found that after my freshman year, classes started getting really tough, and especially my math classes. So who here does not like math? Anybody? A couple of you? Yeah, all right. You know, in my case, as an astrophysics undergrad, it's not that I didn't like math, it's that math didn't like me. And I struggled pretty mightily in my math classes, right? Like calculus is all right, and linear algebra, that's okay, but by the time I got the differential equations, it was game over. And so as a result, my GPA started dropping. I was struggling in my classes. And my commandant of cadets, my OFC, sat me down one day and said, "You're at risk of losing your scholarship." And in my case, I came from a blue-collar, working-class family. We didn't have a whole lot of money. I mean, we were fine, but my parents couldn't have afforded to send me to a place like Stanford without financial assistance, without the scholarship that I had in the Air Force. So I was suddenly going from an awesome first year, loving life, to, in my sophomore year, being at risk of losing my scholarship and having to drop out of school. And then just to add insult to injury, it was right around that time, in my sophomore year, that the Air Force informed me that I was medically disqualified to be a pilot. My dream crushed right before me, right? And because of this, because I wear these, for those of you who either wear glasses or have contacts, that was it. I mean, other than that, I was a perfect physical specimen. Remember, this is a quarter century ago. I was a lot better shape than I am now. And so, I was at a really dark point in my life. How many AS200s and 250s are in the room right now? Yeah, so your sophomore year, some people, at least back then, we used to call it the sophomore slump. And I was in that slump. I was in the bottom of that slump. I was in the trench. I was like 6 feet below the bottom of that slump. And I was, if I had a dog, if I did have a dog, that dog would have died. My girlfriend broke up with me. It was like a horrible, horrible year. And if not for the mentorship of my cadre at that time, as well as my friends, who knows where I would have ended up. But they helped me see, instead of focusing on the things that I couldn't do, they helped me focus on the things that were still open to me, the possibilities and options that were still right in front of me. It took a little help, encouragement, to keep my eyes open to what those options were. So I changed my degree, changed my major, so that I could retain my scholarship, tech to tech, for those of you who are doing tech STEM. My OFC convinced me that, why don't you do something that's tech that doesn't require as much math? Why don't you look at one of these degrees And so that's what I ended up doing. And the rest is history, as they say. I became a civil engineer, 32 ECHO. For those of you who just recently received your AFSCs for the seniors, and for the AS300s that are getting ready to fill out your Form 53s and put down your list of preferences. You know, don't forget about 32 ECHO. It's a good one. And so that really changed the trajectory of my career and the trajectory of my life, really, definitely. And the rest of it has just been a wild ride and a real adventure. And I haven't looked back. I haven't regretted anything that's happened. I haven't had a bad assignment in my entire time in the Air Force. Because I think the real important lesson I learned back then when I was a cadet was, just like you know, everything is determined off of your attitude. And if you come at things with a positive attitude and an open mind, then you're probably going to succeed. And in the end, where you end up is going to be a good place. You might have to do some twists and turns, like I said. It may not be a direct line from point A to point B. You may have to go through, you know, C, D, E, F, E, H, and I, and that's okay. Wait for it. The punchline's coming. Just don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your teammates. Don't give up on each other. You're going to get there. All right, so I definitely want to spend some time answering questions, talking to you about things that you want to talk about, not just, you know, droning on about my life story. And so I want to actually open up for some Q&A, and we can talk about anything you want. No question is off limits. No subject is barred for discussion. We can certainly talk about my perspective and my experiences throughout my career. We can talk about the space program and my time at NASA, or we can talk about what I do or have done as an explosive ordnance disposal officer. Whatever you want to talk about, I'll open the floor now for any questions. Please go ahead. Any one of them? Who's going to be first? Go ahead.
Sir, I'd like to hear a little bit about your favorite parts of working at NASA.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. As I said, I worked with NASA. I actually ended up working with NASA for 2 years directly, and it was on an internship. And I would like to say it was an internship through my university, which it kind of was in a way. They were the ones that matchmade us. They kind of introduced us to each other. And I went in as a freshman. I went to NASA and interviewed. We had to, you know, provide our resume and our transcripts and our grades and all that stuff. And I did my interviews, and I thought, wow, the cat's meow. Remember, that was my freshman year. That was before the whole sophomore slump thing happened. But NASA never called me back, which like really crushed my ego for a little bit. And I was like, ah, they're lost, bunch of losers. And then sophomore slump happened, really rough year. And then by my junior year, I was a different person. My freshman year, I was a successful astrophysics undergraduate who was going to be a pilot and become an astronaut and go to Mars. My sophomore year, the whole universe was shutting down on me. And then my junior year, I'm a civil engineering student. Got to become a civil engineer, you know, focus on environmental engineering. And so totally different person. I'd gone through, you know, all the bumps and twists and curves, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get a phone call from NASA, junior year. And this gentleman, his name is Dr. Christopher McKay, identified himself as a researcher at NASA, and he said he had my application in front of him. I think about 2 years later, he's got my application. That's federal government at work right there. And he wanted to know if I was still interested in an internship with NASA, a one-year paid internship with NASA. That's a sweet deal. It was a small stipend, but still every little bit counts when you're a starting college student. And I said, absolutely. I said, well, it says here you're an astrophysics student at Stanford. Is that still right? And I said, well, actually, partially right. I'm still at Stanford, but I don't study astrophysics anymore, so you probably don't even want me to do your research. And he said, well, tell me, what do you study? And I said, well, it has nothing to do with space stuff. It's environmental engineering. And he said, well, tell me more about your environmental engineering. What specifically do you do in your program? And that's, by the way, I want to pause there for a second. That's an interesting lesson because you can choose what kind of a person you want to be. You can be like Dr. Christopher McKay, where you want to probe a little bit deeper and just not judge people off of their superficialities on their titles and degrees. Probe a little bit further and find out the rest of the story. And he did. And I said, well, At Stanford, the environmental engineering program is really focused on water. Water is important, you guys know that, right? I mean, you use it every single day, but oftentimes we don't think about it. You know, the joke about water is it's like air. You never think about it as long as you have it. And once you don't have it, it's all you think about. If you don't believe me, get stuck in a desert. It's all you think about, water. So I said, well, we focus on water, and it's water resources, it's hydrology, fluid dynamics, wastewater treatment, subsurface aquifers. And he said, stop, you got me, you're hired, you're on the team. And I'm thinking to myself, that's so bizarre, why would you want an environmental engineer undergraduate student to be a part of this research team? And then he explains that he's a planetary scientist, and what his area of expertise is Mars. And he's putting together a team of researchers looking to find water on Mars. So 30 years ago, I was part of a team. Now I was one of the undergraduate folks on this team. He had graduate students, postdoctoral folks, and then fellows from NASA. And we picked the landing sites on Mars where today, fast forward, there are landers and rovers that are not just looking for water, but have found water. Both permafrost, subsurface, frozen, and we think there's some liquid water, some brackish, kind of salty water. But so it's pretty exciting stuff. And being a part of that was a mind-blowing experience for me. For any of you who are interested in Mars, or interested in the space program, NASA, Space Force, awesome opportunity that I never would have expected would have happened to me after I changed my degree. So don't sell yourself out. That was awesome. And that's to answer your question. That was the experience that I had with NASA. Just learning so much about geology and planetary geology specifically. I just learned so much more than I would have just sitting in a classroom learning about that stuff. Well, there's an epilogue to this story. Actually, there's two epilogues. Part one, after I spent a few years as a civil engineer, I should have asked, are there any civil engineering students in the room? None? Okay. I didn't know anything about civil engineering until I changed my degree. And I learned while I was taking civil engineering classes that it's not just environmental engineering, there's structural engineering, there's geotechnical engineering, there's construction engineering, construction management, all these neat things that I had no idea about. And I actually discovered after a couple of years of this that while I still loved water stuff and environmental engineering, my favorite was construction. That was my favorite thing. Just building stuff, taking a concept, a design, something theoretical, and then working with a team of people to translate that into physical reality, to solve somebody's problem, like build a bridge or a road or a skyscraper or a runway. That is really cool. Fell in love with it. I got hooked, and I ended up applying for an educational delay so I could stay at school for fifth year, so I could get my master's degree, still in civil engineering, but in construction management. And that's what I ended up doing at the airport, by the way. I'm a builder. Spent my first half of my career with Red Horse, which is the Air Force's heavy construction organization, and then I spent 2 years with the Navy Seabees doing construction with them, which is neat. It was an exchange program, learning a different culture, a different language. It's called United States Navy. It's like a totally different world, and I loved it. But that was all because of construction. I love that stuff. So back to NASA. Get a phone call a year later from Dr. McKay, and he asks if I want to come back and do a second year on the internship. And I said, what? Second year? I didn't even know there was such a thing. Yes, sign me up. But I said, but there's only one problem. I'm not doing water anymore. And he could have said, oh, you're not doing water? Okay, thanks. Nice talking to you. See you. But again, Dr. McKay is not that kind of person. And he said, oh, so what are you studying now? I said, well, I already finished my bachelor's. I'm working on my master's, and it's totally has nothing to do with space at all. Totally has nothing to do with geology and hydrology and finding water on Mars. So you're not going to want to hire me. They said, well, what are you doing? They said, well, my master's is going to be in construction management. And I'm really focused on, how can we build things rapidly in extreme environments? The Air Force needs to build stuff for combat. We need to be able to do it quickly and in the middle of a desert or on a mountainside somewhere in the Arctic or wherever, jungle. So has nothing to do with what you're doing. He said, perfect, you're hired, you're back on the team. And I was dumbfounded the second time, and I said, but you guys, you're water researchers. He said, no, that was phase one of our project. Now that we found where we want to go, we got to figure out how we're going to build a base on Mars. So you're perfect for the team. Come on back. Now, I don't know how much of that is him just being, all right, we'll figure out a way to force a square peg into a round hole. But you can do the same thing. In your lives, you know when something's right. And now, whether it's about relationships, or whether it's about your career, or whether it's about an assignment, try to figure out how to make it work. Try to figure out how to get to yes. Try to figure out, okay, well, we'll shave a little bit here, turn a little bit there, and boom, we got a solution. That's what he did with me, right? So the second year with NASA was even more exciting than the first, because we were actually looking at how can we build stuff in space? How can we build stuff on Mars? And the moon, to a certain degree. That's pretty cool. So yeah, go out there and try it. Give it a shot. In fact, some of you may actually be those astronauts building those things on the moon or on Mars, because if you pay attention to what's going on right now, supposedly the Artemis program is going to be bringing us back to the moon in a few years. I mean, the target is 2024 for those of you who keep track. Some pessimists think it'll take a few years more than that. They might be right. And we'll be bringing our first female astronaut onto the surface of the moon, and then that's just a stepping stone for what comes next. So exciting times. What else? What other questions do you have? What else do you want to say? Yes, go ahead, please.
So what are some motivators that kept you going in the Air Force for 25 years?
Sure. Thanks for asking that question. As I said earlier, I've loved my career in the Air Force, and I have no regrets, although it hasn't been easy. It isn't going to be easy for you either. Life is hard. Life is tough. And the Air Force service in our nation in uniform is tough and demanding. And there's ups and downs. There's disappointments, there's heartbreaks, there's losses, there's tragedies. That's life. The thing that has motivated me throughout all of it, honestly, are my teammates. More so than anything else, it's been my teammates. Because before I even had a family, before I got married and had kids, I had teammates. I had wingmen. That inspired me, motivated me, and helped me when I was kind of struggling or having self-doubt or looking at myself in the mirror and saying, is this really where I want to be? Is this really what I want to do? In particular, one story, and I always have to disclaimer this by saying, for those of you, especially the POC, that have heard me tell any of these stories before in the past, in my previous visits to your university, I apologize, and I will claim, with early onset of senility that I never told this story before. But when I was a captain in Red Horse, which I told you before, Red Horse is a heavy construction squadron. My particular Red Horse squadron was the 820th Red Horse Squadron in Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I was pointing at your commander because he and I have gone back a few times in our Air Force careers, even though we come from different functional communities. We've served together at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia, which is the mecca of rescue, the rescue community, which is a great bunch of human beings and heroes that I was lucky enough to serve with in Georgia, in Valdosta, Georgia. But then also, there's a couple other places like Davis-Monthan in Arizona, and then Nellis Air Force Base, which is just a really exciting place to be. And it happens to have been the home of the 20th Red Horse Squadron where I served. And it was a great place because this is the first time that I was actually ever stationed kind of in the desert, in the Southwest. And as a young single officer living in Vegas is a lot of fun too. But on top of that, we had a huge range complex, a huge bombing range complex, a lot of room to maneuver and travel and build and experiment with things as a young engineer. The Red Horse Squadron that I was in was the lead squadron for demolition work, so explosive demolitions, which is kind of fun. I had never done that before, aside from a few fireworks as a kid. This is like real fireworks, like think C4, dynamite, TNT, thousands of pounds or hundreds of thousands of pounds of explosives, which is fun. I mean, who doesn't want to blow stuff up and get paid to do that, right? And throughout all that, basically what our battle rhythm was as young engineers in Red Horse is you would spend a the design's been stamped and approved by our boss, we put together a team of NCOs and airmen and go fly out to some exotic place in South America or Africa or Europe or the Middle East or Asia, and then we build that project that we designed. Spend a couple months there in some different country, eating different food, interacting with other people, other cultures, building something, and then go back home, spin, rinse, repeat, do it all over again. And so I've been doing this for about 2.5, almost 3 years, and I was loving it, and I didn't want to stop doing it. You know, one of the things you might find in your life is once you find something that you really love doing, you don't want to stop doing it. But then somebody's going to move your cheese on you and make you find something else different. Get you outside your comfort zone, make you grow, make you learn. So I was getting at that point where I thought I'd found what it was I wanted to do for the rest of my career. And I was looking at two choices. Either the Air Force is going to give me another assignment, I got to go somewhere else and learn a new skill set, not do the thing that I loved, and not be with these people that I totally love being with and working with, or getting out of the Air Force. And I had friends from grad school that were calling me up at the time saying, hey, you need to come work for our company. We'll give you a lot of money to travel around the world and build stuff. We know you love doing that. So it's kind of tempting. So one of my wingmen, one of my peers, fellow engineer who's an academy grad, I asked him, we were kind of doing some soul searching together, and I said, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay in or are you going to get out? Are you going to go work in a construction company on the outside? And he said, well, I've given this some thought, and I boiled it down to 3 questions. Am I still having fun doing what I'm doing? Am I still learning new things? Am I still growing as a person? And am I still proud of the people that I'm working with? And if the answer to those 3 questions is yes, then I'm going to stay in. And if the answer ever is no, then I'm going to get out. And so back to your question of, what's motivated me in my 25 years, aside from my teammates, it was that advice. And I still use it today. And I still keep in touch with this guy. He's a great guy. But I still use this litmus test. And you can use it for where you're at, your current job, whether you can stay in the military or get out, whether you're in the right relationship or not. I mean, this is a good litmus test for a whole lot of things. And you should truly ask yourself, are you still having fun? Are you still happy? And granted, not every day is going to be a cakewalk. Not every day is going to be perfect. There are going to be down days. But generally, on average, are you still happy? Are you still learning new stuff? Because even if you're ecstatic, if you're doing the same thing day in, day out forever, it's going to get boring. It's going to be anticlimactic, right? And then the most important of those 3 questions is, do you still respect the people that you're with? And to say that another way, if you ever find yourself bragging about the people that you're with, like unconsciously, just kind of sliding into braggadocio about them. Like, let's say you're on the phone with your parents, or your sibling, or your best friend. And if you ever say, "Oh, let me tell you about this cadet who's in my detachment. She is so cool. She speaks 3 languages. She's got 2 degrees. She's traveled to China. She's gonna be a pilot." If you ever accidentally find yourself bragging about something like that, you're probably in a good place. You're probably on a good team. That's being proud of your teammates. And on the flip side of that, if you're not bragging about your teammates, if you're maybe embarrassed to tell people where you're at or where you work or who you work with, or maybe, heaven forbid, you're ashamed of something that one of your teammates has done, then you kind of have a choice. And the choice is really simple. It's either you roll up your sleeves and you start changing your team and fixing that, or it's time to go to a different team. And that's all right. That's a choice of conscience. And so that's the reason why I'm still in after all these years. Even though things have changed, I'm still having fun. I'm still learning and growing, and I'm still immensely proud of my teammates at work. Thanks for asking. Who else has got a question or something with it? Yes.
Sir, real quick,
Yes.
when you ask your question, make sure you state your name and what your AS level is, so he has some context of who he's talking to.
Yeah, that's 200s, back to that very critical year. You're at the precipice. You got a lot of options in front of you, making a decision. As a lieutenant, I think one of the things I would have, if not done differently, but thought a little bit differently about when I became a second lieutenant. Of course, I was very happy to finally be across that threshold of commissioning. Where's the AS400s at in the room? Okay, they know what I'm talking about. You can see it. It's like that finish line is so close you can almost touch it. The light at the end of the tunnel's coming, and you're almost there at the end of a long 4-year, or in some cases 5-year journey. And by the way, spoiler alert, once you cross that finish line, once you break that tape, once you get that gold bar that you've earned, you're going to discover when you get to the other side of that finish line, that's actually not the finish line, that's the starting line. You're starting the real marathon at that point. Game on. And I think as a second lieutenant, when I was at that point, I was raring to go. I wanted to go lead. I wanted to go be a flight commander. I wanted to go be in charge because I'd spent 4 years preparing to be in charge. And that's good. That's good. You should all want to go lead. What I don't think I fully understood, and maybe my more mature classmates got this and I was a little bit behind them on, was honestly, as a second lieutenant, I thought the whole thing was about me. I thought the whole thing was about me. Because, look at it, the Air Force has just spent 4 years pouring leadership into me and developing me and training me and perfecting me to be the best officer I could be. And Stanford has spent 5 years pouring things into me and investing me to be the smartest engineer I could be. And so I thought, yeah, this is all about numero uno, which of course is not what it's all about. As a leader, it's all about your team. It's all about your troops. Being a selfless, humble, compassionate, servant leader. I wasn't ready for that. I kind of messed up. Actually, it took me several years to learn where I really fit into the organizational structure as a leader. And it only happened, in my case, it only happened because I had some awesome NCOs and senior NCOs that took the time to help educate me, to help mentor me on how to be a better officer leader. Now, I know that might sound counterintuitive because I'm sure each and every day most of the instruction that you receive comes from an officer who's sitting up in front of the classroom or standing up in front of the classroom, who's telling you, hey, I was a cadet at the academy or at ROTC, or maybe I went through OTS, and I am now an officer, which is what you aspire to become, and so let me tell you how you can be the best officer that you can be. And there's value in that, but you can also learn a lot from your NCOs. Now, while you're in the detachment, listen to your NCOs, take leadership lessons from them. NCOs are leaders. They've got a wealth of leadership advice, if you're willing to listen, that will benefit you to become a better officer. And then when you become a commissioned officer, for those of you who are going to do that, please don't do what I did as a brand new second lieutenant. Don't barge into the unit and say, I'm in charge, everybody listen to me. Listen, take feedback and inputs from your NCOs, and then make your decision as the officer. At the end of the day, you're the one making the decision. You're making that command decision, as we say. But take that feedback. My father, who was an NCO himself in the Marine Corps, he always used to say, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you can listen twice as much as you talk. And I know today I'm violating that principle, but that's part of the responsibility of being the guest speakers. I have to speak twice as much as I'm listening. But that's, I think, the lesson that I would relay to you from my experience as a second lieutenant. What else? Shoot.
Hey, Colonel Bongiovi, Cadet Ryehouse, AS300. How have your experiences doing internships for programs outside of just Air Force helped you when you commissioned as an officer?
Yes, great question. So I believe as a matter of principle, or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, that, remember I was saying question number 2 in my 3 litmus tests is, are you still growing, are you still learning? The best way to learn is to force yourself out of your comfort zone and get outside of what you know. Get outside of your happy place. stretch yourself a little bit, put yourself in an environment that you're not familiar with. And that could be something like going on an exchange program. It could be doing an internship. It could be just traveling abroad, volunteering for an assignment overseas, learning another language. For those of you who only speak one language, learn a second one. If you already know 2 or 3, learn a 4th one. If the Department of Defense comes to you later on in your careers and says, hey, how would you like to go to the Defense Language Institute to learn Swahili? Say, yes, absolutely. Because even if you find out that you don't love Swahili, you stretch yourself and you learn something. On the flip side, you might decide that Swahili is your favorite language, and now you want to be an East African expert. Anytime you have to do things like that, internships, quads, exchange programs, whether it's inter-service exchange programs like the one I was talking about with the Navy, or whether it's here as cadets, working with your peers in the Army ROTC program and learning kind of how do they do things, how do they do PT, how do they organize training and equip. Any opportunity you have to try something different, provided that it's legal, of course, I encourage you to do that. It will grow you as a person. It will broaden your horizons. It'll broaden your thinking. And in a counterintuitive sort of way, not only do you learn more about other people and how they approach problem solving and team building, but you also learn more about yourself. You kind of learn more about what your boundaries really are, what your limits really are. You'll be surprised, I think, just how flexible you are if you allow yourself to be. And it makes you a better leader by doing that. You know, leaders, whether you're in uniform or not, leaders are, one of the things that leaders are is they're problem solvers. Your job is to be a problem solver. People are going to bring you problems. Whether it's your POC, you know, AS300 and GMC are going to bring you problems, or the cadre bring you problems, give me problem solver. And the real challenge with problem solvers is if you're in a room full of other problem solvers that look and think and act and talk just like you, you're not going to be very good at solving complex problems because it's going to be, you know, an echo chamber of like-minded people that are thinking the same thing, getting some groupthink, as we call it, and then you become very vulnerable to the threat of being like a bunch of lemmings marching off a cliff together. We need diversity in thinking. We need diversity of perspective. That makes us stronger. That makes us better problem solvers, which makes us better leaders. And you get that through having those kinds of experiences. How are we doing on time?
We've got about 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, awesome. We've got plenty of time. Okay, what else? Way in the back. Go ahead.
Colonel Bongiovi, Cadet Storm's and AS400, and I'm a 21A select. Sir, how do you find ways to set expectations for a job you've never done before?
Gosh. How do I set expectations for a job that I've never done before? For myself, you mean?
For your subordinates, sir.
Oh, for my subordinates.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
So first off, and you may have gotten this advice from some of your cadre, when you go to lead in your first unit, let's say, you're going to be a maintainer, you're going to be a maintenance officer, and by the way, I love the maintenance community, because much like civil engineers, right off the bat as a second lieutenant, you are straight in there working with the team, working with the troops from day one. And I know we have some aircraft maintenance folks amongst us on the cadre side over here. We got a couple of them over there, both from the Army and the Air Force background. And I myself, I like to say that I was a maintainer too, at least in spirit, if nothing else, because before I even joined the Air Force, before I went to California, before I worked at NASA, remember I told you how much I loved airplanes? I just wanted to be around airplanes all the time, any way I could. And if I could fly airplanes, all the better. But I couldn't afford to get a private pilot's license. I couldn't pay for the rental of the aircraft, let alone the gas or the class hours. So this is a little plug for You Can Fly. If any of you are interested in flying, go for the You Can Fly program because they'll pay for it. Take advantage of that while you can. So the way I did it, kind of by me or by crook, is there is a small uncontrolled airport about 45 minutes away from my hometown, a little small town called Akron, New York. And I went there like during the summertime, every single day, and I just hounded the heck out of the maintenance shop that was there until they finally agreed to hire me on as an apprentice level mechanic. single and double engine turboprop, logging in hours towards my A&P on, small Cessnas, Pipers, little dinky airplanes. But the beauty of it was I got to spend all my summers in high school around airplanes. I got to work on them, touch them. Now, of course, I was the apprentice. So of all the mechanics in the shop, they're all knowledgeable, competent people, and then there's me. I was the idiot apprentice who they gave all the crappy stuff to. Like I was the guy who took all the rivets off of the cowling. I was the one who, hammered the bent props. I'm the one who did all the spark plug testing, and trust me, I electrocuted myself more than a half dozen times. You name it. But I just got to be in the shop, around the mechanics, and around the airplanes, and I got to learn a lot about it, which I love. And what's even better is that as the stupid apprentice, every time we worked on a power plant, we were required to take the aircraft up for a check ride before we turned it back over to the pilot or the owner. And what was neat about it is our master mechanics, they all had pilot's license. And so they would fly the aircraft so that they could do the check ride. The gas was covered for free by the airport. And they would always bring me up with them because they didn't want to spare two mechanics from the shop. They'd always bring me because once they got to altitude, I wasn't cleared to take off and land, but once they got to altitude, they'd turn the controls over to me so they could do the diagnostics on the repair. And they would tell me, bank left, bank right, throttle up, throttle down, let's go 3,000 feet up, and whatever they wanted to do so they could see if the fix had worked. And we stalled out. I think in the 3 summers that I did this, we probably stalled out 6 times. Twice on recovery. Actually landed in a field out in the middle of Western New York twice, and which is scary the first time. That's actually scary every time. The first time I actually thought, oh, this is it. This is how I'm going to die. Well, at least it's in an airplane, so it's okay. But these are super light airplanes. I remember the first time it was a Cessna 152, so light that even a gust of wind, you get a little loft out of it. They're just like super light. And so I learned a lot in that experience. But where I was going with this whole story is, as a mechanic, you are going to know as a maintenance officer that your troops know, by and large, more than you do about what it is that you're working on. Especially your NCOs. Your airmen maybe not, because they're learning too. They're like the apprentice. But your NCOs and your senior NCOs, they know it. They are the subject matter experts. So when you come walk in on day 1 as a second lieutenant in your maintenance squadron, or in your civil engineering squadron, or in your logistics readiness squadron, or you can name, there's a whole bunch of community security forces squadron, I could go on. Don't even bother trying to impress your troops with your knowledge or your expertise. What's that old saying? Your team, your troops, they don't care how much you know, they need to know how much you care. What you can do best to set expectations with your subordinates is to, from day 1, make it really clear that you're not the expert, and that you know it, and that you are in charge, and that you know that too. Don't leave any doubt in anyone's mind as to your competence in command. But third thing, expectation setting, that you care. You genuinely care about them as human beings and about them collectively as a team. And if you set that expectation up front and you're clear and honest in that communication, your team will know it, they'll believe it, they'll respect it, and then over time, you'll evolve into being a high-functioning team. And, by the way, this is another problem with Second Lieutenant Bongiovi had. I showed up thinking I'm going to be inheriting awesome teams of perfection, teams where everybody on the team is like a 4-star player. And what I learned very rapidly was I kept on getting these teams of, kind of troublemaking, borderline, shady characters, low performance or attitude issues or marital issues or financial problems or divorce or alcohol problems or legal issues, and the more I saw this, the more I was like, either I just have bad luck or the Air Force is just filled with crappy people. And actually, it took me a little while to learn that, first of all, my teams were seeing the same thing in me that I was seeing in them. They're like, oh, we got Lieutenant Bongiovi, oh, come on, he's a junior ranking officer in our unit, he's an egotistical, self-centered bastard who only thinks about himself, he doesn't care about us, why did we get stuck with him? Are all officers like this? I didn't realize that, because I was, again, I had my blinders on, just thinking about it from my perspective. But the other thing, more importantly, is we are all imperfect people. We're all human beings, we're all flawed. We all have our little chips and nicks and dings and areas that we can improve on. And the sooner we acknowledge that, the sooner we kind of accept that, the sooner we can get down to the business of being leaders. And not leading because we're perfect, not leading because we're sitting on top of the mountain looking down imperiously at our subordinates, telling them, be like I am. Climb up the side of this mountain and reach the summit that I'm standing on top of looking down my nose at you at. That's not leadership. Leadership is you're climbing up the same mountain that your team is climbing up together. You're all slugging it out together. You're all sweating and struggling together. That you're saying, you know what? I need to get better at my push-ups too. Let's do push-ups together. I need to work on my run time too. Let's do that together. I need to do my education too. I need to work on my next degree. Hey, Sergeant Smith, you're working on your bachelor's, I'm working on my master's. Look, we're going to do this together. Instead of being embarrassed about our areas of improvement, that's an opportunity for you to really lead. Not because you're perfect, but because you're acknowledging that you're a team. And then by doing that, by taking that sort of approach, you're going to make each member of your team better than they were, the best version of themselves. Not perfect, best version of themselves. You're going to, as a nice knock-on side benefit, make yourself a better person and a better leader. And then the best part about it is you're going to make the whole team a better team. Because they all know that even if the LT is not perfect, that LT cares about us, and we're going to get across that finish line together as a team. That's how I think you can set expectations like that.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, shoot, what?
I just said thank you, sir.
You bet. Go ahead.
Sir, Jeff Malari, sworn in Fausled. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your deployments as either environmental engineer or EOD officer.
Okay, yeah, deployments, I love them. If you get a chance to do deployments, you're going to reference my earlier comment about taking opportunities and advantages when you get them to go and learn and spread your wings. Deployments is one of the great ways to do it, because oftentimes what I've found in my experience is deployments are kind of where the rubber hits the road. I mean, when you're back in your home base, you're doing a lot of training and a lot of preparing for deployments. You know, for the war, for the mission, for the contingency, for the operation. And then when you actually get out on deployment, this is what you've been preparing for. But the other thing about deployments I found is, again, this is just my experience, that back home, they'll say you're a lieutenant. Back home, it's the captain who's running the flight, and the lieutenant's kind of like the assistant, right? You're the number 2, you're the ADO, you're the deputy flight commander, you're the understudy. And where you really get that chance to shine is on the deployment, where you're it. Now you're stepping into that seat, and all eyes are on you. The spotlight is on you. You finally get to do it. So, in my case, I, as a second lieutenant, my first civil engineer squadron, there were 13 lieutenants in my unit, more than average, and we all wanted to deploy. We all wanted to do it. And it was super hard to get that opportunity. This was prior to September 11th. It was prior to a lot of the hostilities which generated a high ops tempo, double-edged sword. And so it was just really hard to get that opportunity. However, once I joined Red Horse, I was deploying all the time. All the time. I lost count like after my 6th deployment in Red Horse and Seabees. And full disclosure, as a young single officer, I was eating it up. No problems. Now, for my married counterparts that had families, that was difficult. And I can talk about that too. But deployments to every continent on this globe of ours, with the exception of Antarctica. It's the only place I haven't been, and so it's still on my bucket list. I haven't knocked it off. And then with, climate change being the way it is, maybe, it'll be warm enough that I'll feel comfortable getting down there. But I'm from Buffalo, New York, so I think I can handle the snow. It's just, I haven't had a chance to get down there yet. And so a lot of construction deployments with the CBs and Red Horse, and those were fun. I think probably my favorite one, if I had to pick a favorite, probably would have been when I was in Chile, in South America. We were working collaboratively between a Red Horse team, and I wasn't even the OIC. I wasn't the officer in charge. I was the number 2 guy. And the only reason why I even got to go on this project, this deployment, was because I spoke Spanish. And not as a first language, but I spoke enough Spanish that it was passable. And we had plenty of NCOs and airmen on our team that spoke Spanish. But one of the requirements was the Chilean military engineers wanted at least one officer who could speak some intelligible Spanish. And lo and behold, I happened to be the lucky person. So again, another plug for learning languages. You never know how it's going to open up a door for you. And so we went down to Chile, and we spent a few months in the Andes Mountains building roads with the Chilean military engineers. And it was great because we got to do a lot of quarry work, blasting operations, basically detonating rock on the sheer cliffs of the Andes Mountains. And then doing road construction. And we were in some really remote parts of South America that are kind of like, on the other side of the equator, it's like the flip side, it's like the Pacific Northwest. It's sort of like being in Washington or even Alaska. Just beautiful environment, beautiful terrain, and great people. We got to basically get our way to these very remote, austere construction sites on horseback or by canoe, basically, mountain streams, or in some cases, flying in some single and double engine turboprops, like the kind I worked on when I was in high school, in order to kind of lily pad our way from airstrip to airstrip. And these are like dirt airstrips, so that we could kind of build this road in piecemeal. It was a fantastic experience, in my opinion. Now, kind of contrast that with the kind of deployments that I had as an explosive ordnance disposal officer. So about midway through my career, even though I loved construction and still do, everywhere I went with military deployments anyways, I kept on seeing these small teams of crazy people who would put themselves in harm's way, and all they did was work with explosives. And they had this tight camaraderie, this tight team bonding experience. They were super smart, really weird sense of humor, and I just wanted to be a part of that team. I wanted to be on that team. That's EOD. And just so happens in the Air Force, explosive ordnance disposal is a subcategory of civil engineers, along with firefighters, by the way. If any of you want to be firefighters, that's also civil engineers. And this is an unpaid advertisement for the civil engineer AFSC. And so I went to EOD school, which is in the Panhandle, Florida, at Eglin Air Force Base, which is beautiful if you've never been there. Fort Walton Beach and Destin, just fantastic. So I get to go to school to learn how to blow stuff up in the Panhandle, Florida. And all of our schoolwork is classified, by the way. So at the end of the day, you can't bring any homework home with you because it's classified. You got to leave it in the vault at the schoolhouse. No tests at home, no homework at home. So what do you do in the Panhandle, Florida, when you can't bring any homework home on weekends and at night? You go to the beach. So it was like pretty much the fantastic assignment. And then after becoming an EOD officer, the deployments that I had, I was in EOD school when September 11th happened. My deployments since then were all in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and other places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it kind of changed a little bit because these are now non-permissive environments where, truthfully, we're risking our lives every day once you go outside the wire. And we were getting shot at and blown up, and I've lost some friends in these deployments. And my career field's not alone in this regard. There's a whole lot of battlefield airmen in our Air Force that many people don't think about who've had these sorts of experiences. I think the TACP community, the combat rescue officers, and PJs, and just the rescue community at large, but other battlefield airmen as well. Great career fields if you like that kind of excitement, if you're into the adrenaline, and if you're into that teamwork, the esprit de corps, the camaraderie of being a part of that kind of a family.
AS400. How do you find ways to say no? Because you talked about finding ways to say yes. So how do you know when to say no or keep you or your family from burning out?
Yeah, so I'm still learning that lesson. I haven't perfected it. So in full disclosure, everything that I've talked about with you all today, everything, whether it's career or college, because remember, first and foremost, you are all college students. Right now, your number one priority is to graduate. All of those things that I did and have done in my career were very rewarding, very satisfying, very challenging, but not a single one of them was as hard as being a husband or a parent. I should say being a spouse, right? That's the hardest job I've ever had. And I fail at it on a daily basis. Still learning, still a student. I'm an undergraduate student. I'm the stupid apprentice that I was back in high school all over again as a father and a husband. And truthfully, being a father or a mother or a spouse and in the military is highly risky. And I'm not just talking about divorce. I'm just saying it's highly risky to your sanity and to your soul. And it requires a special family to be able to thrive in this demanding life that the military leads. Because you're PCSing every couple of years, depending on your rank. And there's deployments and TDYs. Like even in this job that I have right now, which I love, I absolutely love coming and visiting our outstanding universities in the Northeast region. I love talking with you and meeting with your cadre every year, at least once a year. But I'm on the road a lot, as you might imagine, and that takes me away from my family, and there's prices to pay for that when you do that, if you're not careful about that. I used to think, when I was a single lieutenant, I used to think there's a kind of a punchline. I think the Army may have coined this joke, but we use it too. That if the Air Force wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you a family. And that really, having a family as an officer takes you away from the mission. It makes you less ready. It makes you more vulnerable. Because when the balloon goes up and the Air Force needs you to go fly, fight and win, or to go put warheads on foreheads, well, your heartstrings are being tugged in two different directions. And what about my kids? And what about my wife? And we're going through some things right now, and I gotta be distracted. I mean, I'm in the middle of a critical operation, but I'm also thinking about this thing over there. And so it makes you more vulnerable. In fact, I remember the first deployment I had when I was with the Navy Seabees. We were in a big auditorium, not unlike this. Seabee battalion's about 650 people. So, pre-COVID, we were all packed in like sardines. We got our mission brief. We're getting ready to deploy. And you picture like a big auditorium like this. And then when we got done with all the pre-deployment briefs and everything, all of our bags are packed. They open the doors to the side of the auditorium. We all spill out in the parking lot where our buses are all lined up, ready for the Seabees to get on board. And we're going to take those buses out to the airstrip. We're going to get on the airplanes and fly out. And you know who's in between us and the buses? Our families. There's a little bit different approach towards deployment than the way the Air Force does it, but there's kids, and there's spouses, and there's crying. Watch little kids clinging on their moms and dads in uniform, not wanting to let them go. And this wasn't even a combat deployment, mind you. This is a permissive deployment we're going on. And I remember as an airman, getting on the bus with my Navy partners, my shipmates as we call them, and I turned to the junior officer next to me and I said, that was horrible. I've never seen anything as emotionally disturbing as that. I'm glad we were finally getting out of here. Keep in mind, I was single at the time. And he said to me these haunting words I will never forget. He said, if you thought that was bad, wait till we come back. And I didn't know what he meant because I thought, when you come back from the deployment, it's all hugs and kisses and balloons and rainbows and unicorns and life is good. Because I didn't know what I was talking about because I was a single person, so I didn't know what happens when you rip a family apart and then you crash them back together again. You get like a supernova explosion is what you get of emotion. And sure enough, 7 months later, at the end of our deployment, we were doing 7 and 7s, which was our battle visit back then. I saw it firsthand, exactly what he's talking about. And the divorces and the suffering and the kids who wouldn't talk to their moms and dads and just all kinds of dysfunctionality. Because remember my earlier comment? We're human beings. We are flawed, imperfect, yourself to that vulnerability, by opening yourself up to that risk, taking some risks in terms of making a commitment to another human being, whether that's a partnership or a marriage or whatever, by doing that, and by the way, if you should ever, any of you, take it a step further and make a commitment to having little human beings that you're responsible for their care and feeding and welfare and development and growth, right? By doing that, you actually end up becoming a better leader. You become more of that compassionate, selfless servant leader that I was talking about earlier. You will become a better lieutenant, a better captain, a better old colonel by learning how to be a teammate, a partner, a spouse, a parent. They're actually not exclusive. They're actually compatible. It's just a whole lot harder and more complicated. But you know what? Being a leader is all about taking risks. Being a leader is all about making some risk-based decisions, making some calculated risks. And not doing the easy thing, or the quick thing, or the simple thing, but doing the thing that requires bravery, courage, hard work, dedication, heart. That's what you gotta do. And as leaders, by the way, this is my last comment before I get off the stage.